It's 1970. A young student named Nolan Bushnell is enjoying the riveting, unmatched board game that is Go, when a Stanford researcher called Jim Stein approaches him and asks if he wants to try out Space War, a 1962 space combat simulation that they were running on the computer labs. Bushnell agrees, and they start playing rounds against each other whenever Nolan could visit. On a quick aside, Space War was a two-player game where they would pilot two spaceships and dogfight each other. Simple stuff! Nolan saw much more than that. He envisioned that if one could somehow get the game to run on arcade machines and run multiple instances at once, allowing for multiplayer gameplay, this would be a huge hit. But at that time, the computers that could run Space War were just too expensive to make it even economically feasible to try it out for arcade. Hopefully, that won't be foreshadowing for PC gaming's entire existence.
Then, you saw an ad for a new Data Nova General computer at a modest price of $4,000. With renewed interest, he takes his buddy Ted Dabney to the Stanford labs, he shows him Space War, and gives him the sales pitch. And a partnership was born, and a pursuit to create a working prototype that worked on arcade machines had begun. So, now that a partnership was established and a goal was in mind, it was time for a name. Sausage. Let's call them Sausage. Besides the name being difficult to pronounce, the partnership will later run into an issue with a Polish roofing business that had already trademarked it, but we'll get back to that one. Let's take a look at that computer that Dabney and Bushnell bought. A sporting 16-bit mini-computer with improved integrated circuitry over the predecessors. The makers were confident that it could run any tasks that would be performed in a laboratory environment. Unfortunately, the pair would soon run into a lot of complications while working on their prototype. They couldn't run multiple instances of the game as they originally intended, so no LAN, and the monitors could not keep up with the movement of the game in a smooth fashion. Realizing they were looking at the minimum requirements to run the game instead of the recommended requirements when they downloaded it, and with downloadmoreram.com not being a domain yet, this was nearly where this pipe dream came to an abrupt end. But something kept gnawing at Bushnell. He just couldn't shake the feeling that there was something really special right there, in the middle of that star-filled cosmos of his space game clone, just out of reach of his outstretched fingers. He had to do this. He had to make this prototype. After designing custom hardware and toiling for hours, they had finally gotten a dot on the screen, a glimmering pixel, a glowing bit-mapped image. There was hope. They realized that if they were to do this, they were going to build custom hardware from scratch, which would at least be cheaper than their $4,000 PC. What this did mean is that they didn't need multiple instances to run to get the revenue of the game, only one. Instead of multiplayer, they would allow the player to square off against two computer-controlled spaceships and battle it out on the galactic stage. It was time to approach a potential publisher. And they found it. Nutting Associates. Don't laugh. Don't do it. Having come fresh off of the successes of Quiz arcade games, but noticing their steady decline in demand in the 70s, Nutting was eager to find the next big gaming genre, an innovative release to propel them towards greater revenues than ever before. Soon, it all began to fall in place. They had the hardware, the backing, and now they had their name. Computer Space. Not the most original, but this was to appease Nutting, since their quiz game was called Computer Quiz. Because putting computer in front of our products will definitely let people know, yep, that's Nutting. No matter, the prototype was finally in a working state, and their first test audience at a local bar near Stanford was met with positive feedback. It was the first signs of fruitful promise. Then, the news came. Someone else was also developing a Space War clone for arcade machines. Bill Pitts and Hugh Tuck from Mini Computer Applications had realized the same venture as what Bushnell had, and theirs even had a cooler name, Galaxy Game. What started out as a profitable venture had now become a race against time and against a competitor. Both games would mark their calendars. The MOA Expo was the next big event, a chance for both to show off their innovation. The final game state of Computer Space looked like this. It had no microprocessor. The graphic elements were all monochrome in diode arrays. The ships were drawn onto the screen as hardwired bitmaps, and they had a small television screen as the monitor. The day had come. It was showtime. Now, what transpired on that day of the MOA depends on who you believe. Bushnell and Dabney recall the game gathering a lot of attention and trading magazine Cashbox calling it very glamorous and promising. The competitors, Galaxy Game, state that their exhibition had a large, excited crowd that had flocked to see their game in action. Whoever you want to believe is up to you, but let me give you guys the facts of what followed instead. Sausage had gone the way of being cost-effective and finding sufficient alternatives, such as designing custom hardware, pragmatically shifting their goal and making their cabinet from modeling clay and finished by a swimming pool manufacturer that they knew. All in all, inexpensive and still ticked all of the boxes. Now, how much did Galaxy Games spend? Where Bushnell and Dabney had turned every penny, found cheaper alternatives and built custom hardware, Pitts and Tuck went all out. Externally connected to a PDP-11 and running on a Hewlett-Packard 1300A display, Galaxy Game had all the resources in the world at that time to run the game that they needed to run. Earlier, during testing, Sausage had also experimented with joysticks. Oh goodness, that came out wrong. They experimented with joysticks for the game, but found that it would break way too easily in their cabinet when trying to move the spaceship, and resorted to directional buttons. Galaxy Game just said, no, let's get military-grade joysticks that were being used in actual flight simulations. If there was a price, it would be paid instead of made. And perhaps that's where the difference lied. Knowing that they could not hope for turning a profit, many computer applications relied on Galaxy Game to generate enough buzz in order for them to enter some lucrative business by somebody who would invest in them. This did not happen. As for Computer Space, it went up to sell about 1,300 to 1,500 units during its lifetime, bringing in a revenue of over $1 million, mostly from the handmade work of Bushnell and Dabney, and during a time where the arcade gaming industry was still in its infancy, and that a bestseller arcade game would sell around 2,000 units. I'd rack that up as a success. It's their first outing. It was pretty modest, and they didn't really know what they were doing at first, so this was a pretty good start. Isn't that right, Nutting? Nutting had seen this as a disappointment. Comparing this small startup's first attempt at the big leagues to the successes of Computer Quiz back in '66, this was but a measly attempt and not good enough. Bushnell believed the game's novelty and steep learning curve limited their reach, and is quoted in saying, "Sure, I loved it, and all my friends loved it, but all my friends were engineers. It was a little too complicated for the guy with the beer in the bar." This could have been where the story ends. We've seen this play out in the modern day so many times. The pandering to the corporation and their meddling in ideas, the constant need for a cash grab, or to chase the trends that everyone is going towards. But something happened in 1972. Bushnell and Dabney, after being unable to secure a 33% stake in Nutting Associates, decided to leave and enter the business as their own entity. Ultimately, this being one of the deciding factors of a major turn for gaming on the horizon. Right, so now they had their own business. That's great. Probably should change that name of theirs to avoid this copyright of this Polish people and general confusion. Oh, name. What could we name ourselves?
Television into a more social activity.
Something magical happening on the TV for the first time.
The new Atari cartridge game is in.
It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
I guess that name could work. Not too flashy. Now, what's our first game gonna be? Can't just make another one for those university students. You need to make something for those barflies. What's those Magna Fox Odyssey guys up to? They seem to be making a kinda cool tennis game there. It works on those arcade games. Well, better make another copy. It works for Space War. Pong sold 8,000 units. It is considered the first ever commercially successful video game. It spawned a dozen copycats and would sell on Atari's home console for the first time in 1975. Bushnell and Dabney did it. They climbed down the Polish rooftops and shattered the glass ceiling of what video games were and represented. They had made their mark and would leave an unforgettable legacy for various reasons. So why all the fuss I made regarding computer space then? If Pong was so much more successful and obviously what sparked all this? Well, I don't know really. Pong clearly seems to dwarf what it had achieved. It brought video games to homes and local spaces of communities and laid the foundation for an industry. It seems I may have had my facts wrong after all. Maybe it didn't simplify controls of movements with its array-like data structures for precise control of a spaceship which could be incorporated for tanks. Maybe it didn't inspire other developers to jump in and improve features like the graphics with vectors, or improve the controls and movement for a more integral and compact experience. Maybe it didn't inspire a new major genre for arcade games. Maybe it was just a fad, a blip, a flash, a pixel, just floating around in this cosmos of a monochrome screen.